will be told to us by Ray McKay, Sonny Cough, Janice Cough Robins, Betty Cobb, formerly Sister Maria Patches, who was the last principal at St. Edward's School, and Anna Ryan. And I will turn it over to, who is going to start off? Betty. Welcome, everybody. Enjoy.
Can you hear me without the mic?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Try it, you know.
How is this? Is this better?
Yes.
All right, then I think I got to go first, perhaps because I'm the youngest.
Only by a couple of years.
But then when I look at the group here and think about their individual, never mind their combined experience at St. Edward's School, it's certainly more than mine. But I think if we add perhaps the hours spent in this building, I might then have a little claim. I was a Sister Mercy here for 6 years. I came in I'm so nervous now, I can't even remember what year I came. I came in 1962 and left in 1967. The other reason I got to go first was that I said I'd speak a little bit about the history. This wasn't the first convent that the Sisters of Mercy lived in. They came to Bar Harbor to celebrate Bar Harbor's tercentenary. The 300 years, yes, Janice, thank you. And at that time, the Morel family, Louise and Edward Drexel Morel, had purchased a building. And I believe it's the building next door.
Was it the building next door, the one across the street?
I'm not
So
sure.
that was the parish hall. I don't think anybody lived in that.
I thought it could move down the way, but then when the owners who purchased that, the Klein said it was, Debbie's over here saying it is the one that's down the street. That first school, the class was held in one room in the convent. A small class. But then in 1916, the new convent was built. And the new school was opened and enrollment doubled. Double to two? No. I think that Anna is helping me out a great deal right now. I think that I'm a little overwhelmed with the experiences here. And I think what I'd like to do is to let people begin with their memories and then bring it up to my time here. And I will share my experiences. Having said that, I'm relaxed a little bit. I see my husband walk in, and that's a little reassuring. And what I will say that my memories consist of primarily the beauty of the island, the commitment and the generosity of the people in this town. Names stick out, some of the wealthy summer people. Francis Coleman, the DeHedries, one of the wealthiest people here as far as I'm concerned, John LaRosa, what he could say about the history of the school. Alan Kimball, who came in, an example of a parent who was not a Catholic, whose wife was, who put his 2 children through the school, faithful, encouraging. The children that I had, I could steal a line from my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law here and say that the other thing I can say is my father-in-law was in the first graduating class. My brother-in-law was in the 25th graduating class. And my nephew, his son, was in the last graduating class, the class that I taught. The other thing I remember about Bar Harbor is walking downtown, going into any of the stores and being told about Sister Josephine, Sister Rosanna, and Father Fitzpatrick. How could anyone possibly live up to that reputation? Anyway, those were sainted people. Walking once a week to do grocery shopping. Walking down Ledgelawn, across, and down the shore path to buy those groceries at Hatches. Too heavy to lug back, parishioners always brought them back for us. All along the way, we were the old habits then. I never understood why the dogs in Bar Harbor, as soon as we set out, they would start to bark. They don't bark at me now, but in those days, they would walk down, they would bark. Someone would try to say it was because of the mountains around, the wind echoes. Someone else said it didn't like the black. And at this point, I'd like to pass it over to you.
I think maybe it wasn't so much that they bark, they don't now. There's a law now that they have to be kept in, and they ran wild and barked when they wanted to. Well, of course, I went through sub-primary, which they called then, right through 8th grade at St. Edward's. But my memory of the convent was how immaculate it was. I mean, you walked through the door and the floors, and they were not polyurethane, you know, they were waxed and elbow grease that made them just sparkle. I mean, you're immaculate and shiny. But the piano was in the next room there, and that was the music room. And many kids from Bar Harbor, not necessarily Catholic kids, but many kids from Bar Harbor took lessons. From Sister Josephine, but I think Sister Crescentia used to one time too give piano lessons, and I'm sure there were others, but I never took them, so I wasn't in there. I think James took them for a while, but I think he might have taken them from Sister Josephine. But there were 5 nuns at that time in the convent, and the one was a cook. And she was aptly named, I remember the goodies, and she was happy to share with any child, you know, who came in with whatever she had cooked for the day or whatever. And, I mean, I heard many tales of going to Catholic school and the nuns and how awful they were, but I never had that experience. I always had a very pleasant relationship with any teacher I had. And I don't remember any outbreaks like they talk about. But I suppose it may have happened, but I don't ever recall. And my first teacher was Sister Teresa, and we were in the baby room, which meant sub-primary, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And then, I suspect now that it was probably her very early teaching, because she was so young. And even to a kid, to me, she seemed very young. And as you go through the grades, you think of people as old if they hit 30. Well, I didn't have that feeling about the first teacher I had. And then we had Sister Laura, who came back here many years later and was in the convent, obviously before.
With me.
Oh, with you, I was going to say before. And then we had, I think, well, the first superior that I remember was Mother Raymond. I don't know if anyone here remembers Mother Raymond.
What year did you graduate?
38.
Okay, I got out in 39, I'm just trying to place that, so I think I remember Sister Raymond.
Do you? Yes, the first couple of years.
Yeah.
She was the one that reprimanded us. We were sent into her room.
Oh, that's Mother Raphael.
Well, no, that was before my time.
Oh, boy.
Well, I never met her, if she reprimanded. That's because you were in a room. I remember Sister Valeria.
I had her.
Did you have her?
She was my 4th and 5th grade
Yeah.
teacher, and I was telling you, Betty, that probably the best teacher I ever had. Boy, I learned. And there was no, you never got her off track. When it was time for whatever subject we were doing, that's what we did.
Which one are you talking about now?
Sister Valeria,
Valeria.
you probably never
Yeah, I don't
remember.
know.
And then I had Sister Ancilla, and Sister Ancilla spoke softly, and that was the way to talk. She did not want anyone to raise their voice in her class. And speak softly, gently. Well, that was hard. Also in the 3rd grade, I remember we had, I think we still had Sister Hilda. And she was young in those days, and Kay Gower Peverini was in my class. And we did nothing but giggle. I mean, all we had to do was look at each other and we giggled. And of course, the more the teacher said, no giggling, you know, the more we giggled. But then after that, I guess we had, it seemed to me we used to sometimes come over here. I don't know if the piano or what. But it seemed so that we would, maybe as one class, which would be 8 kids at most, probably like 10. And when I graduated, there were only 4 of us, so we were not big classes. But the thing about St. Edward too was, you know, Mrs. Morrell was really a benefactor in many ways. She always gave every child that went to the Catholic school, whether they were Catholic or not. I mean, you just belonged to the school. Every child wrote and asked for something for Christmas, and you always got it.
That's before I got in.
Well, yeah.
I hate to tell you, huh?
Right. Yeah, and then the worst thing came. You had to write that thank you note, which I always dreaded. Oh, right, what will I say to her? But we got through that. And, well, I guess that's pretty much what I remember. I do remember coming in here and going up to the chapel for Mass, and especially in later years when oil was a problem, you know, and they didn't have daily Mass in the church because heating the building, you know, and so they'd have Mass in the convent. And many times I'd come here, and that was the only thing I ever did upstairs. I never went beyond upstairs and into the chapel.
In those days, you couldn't do it.
Oh, I see.
Until just recently, the part of the house where the sisters lived was considered the cloistered part. And only very few special people got to go in there. Like Ken Smith went in once to help do some work. I think Sonny's been upstairs and done some work up in the attic, I bet you. Did you put a TV antenna up
Yeah,
there?
I did. I'd forgotten that until you told me that.
So I'll pass it on to Janice.
Well, my memories of St. Edward schools are really just wonderful. I loved it. I loved the nuns, and just as Anna was saying, we had, I don't remember, what I remember is 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade in one room. 3rd, what comes next? 4th, 5th, and 6th in a room, and then 7th and 8th. And when I was in 8th grade, I had Sister Rosanna. And I was reading the paper the morning before school, and I read where General Eisenhower had one of our soldiers, I don't know if it's hung or hanged. Hanged. He had one of our soldiers hanged for rape. And I just said, one of our soldiers. So I went to school, and Sister Rosanna came in, and this is the way we greeted the nuns, any adult that came in. We stood, and then the first thing you did in the morning was bow, curtsy, and the boys, good morning, Sister Rosanna. And then they all sat down and I stood, and I said, Sister, what does rape mean? What a way to start a nun's day. Well, she said, oh dear Janice, you just sit down. So I got home and looked up rape in my sister's encyclopedia. Pages and pages. And jurisdiction and this and that. Well, I still had no idea what that meant. But I was thinking of, after that, I was thinking of Sister Rosanna coming back here to lunch, saying, you will never, ever guess what happened to me this morning. And I had Sister Stanislaus in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And I kind of thought that I might like to become a nun. And I said, Sister, I think that I might like to become a nun. And she said, well, Janice, you go home and pray about that. And kneel on your hands when you say a Hail Mary. It's more painful and there's more sacrifice involved. Oh, so that ad lib forced, I knelt on my hands to say a Hail Mary, and excruciating pain. And I said to myself, this is so painful, I can't even think about the prayer. So I guess I won't become a nun. And that was just really so much for the convent. And another thing that the sisters taught us was manners. You know, as I said, we stood. When an adult came in the room, we stood. And I remember Sister saying one time, it has come to my attention that the children from St. Edward's School have been roughhousing on the sidewalk. So we're a reflection of St. Edward's School. And so, you know, no housing around. No, she didn't say that. But as you can see, Sister was concerned about us, I think, before, during, and after school. And it was really, really great experience.
Also, while Janice is telling about the manners, you know, we were a class of 4 who graduated. We went to high school. Well, I took college course and none of the other kids did. So here I am in this class with kids, a lot of them I didn't know, and called on. I stood up. Yes,
I did that the first week I went to
I
high
mean,
school.
it was, you always stood when you were spoken to, and you know, and then everybody's looking around and laughing, you know, and red-faced, I'd sit down, you know, but
I think we all went through that.
it was so ingrained. It was like turning the directional signal on, you know, and when you were spoken to, you stood and you addressed the person who spoke to you, but I
I'm
got
always
over it.
very polite to the elders too.
Right, yes.
You'd be in trouble if you weren't. Sonny can't see
Too tight to buy so.
Is it my turn? Can everybody hear me out there?
Yeah, we can hear you, son.
I guess we were always.
I guess I have something to say about my predecessors here.
Thank you.
When Betty talked for about 2 minutes, and she said, well, I'm going to turn this over to somebody else now. And she talked for 5 or 6 more minutes, at least. And Anna was talking about Sister Ancilla, about the piano being out in that room. Sister Ancilla, I took piano lessons from her out there, and she had a black rod, I guess it was made out of wood, it felt like metal.
Oh, you know.
It was about that long, and every time you hit the wrong note, she'd hit you on the knuckles with that stick. I suppose maybe it was good for some people and they taught them how to play. I didn't learn the notes any quicker because she hit me. She hit me quite a few times after quite a few lessons. I stopped taking piano lessons. And maybe she spoke quietly, Anna, but she carried a big stick. I can remember my first day at school over there. Let's see, it would have been about 1933. And I was living with my grandmother there. I lived with my grandmother from approximately the time I was 5 until I was about, I guess, 14 or 15 or something like that. And Grammy took me down to school over here. I remember going in, and sister came to the door. Apparently class had already started. She came with this big black robe on. And I can remember getting behind my grandmother and hanging on her skirts. I didn't want to go in, but I ended up going in. And the other memories that I have there, nearly all pleasant. In the 3rd grade, it was Jimmy Murray and Alice Cantwell, Sadie Lambert, and myself. There were 4 of us in the 3rd grade, and we stayed all together all through high school. And I used to serve Mass upstairs directly over us. Judge Frazier and I, he was about my age, and he was an older boy, and for some reason or other, most of the time we served Mass down there. Mostly it was for Father Fitzpatrick. And so we served Mass a good many days up there. And I recall one other thing that was kind of interesting, that when we go to the bathroom, we had to get permission to go to the bathroom. So you always held up your hand like that. And if you had to go quite badly, you might say, stop. If you had to really go, you went, stop, stop, stop. I'd like to think of any other gems that are important. Maybe we'll get a second chance. And I'd like to introduce you now to Ray McKay. Let's see. His name doesn't end in cough, but he's still a pretty good guy.
Thank you, Sonny. I'd like to represent 7 McKays here. That's what my mother said. 3 of the boys were on their way, but due to the weather, they were held up. Joseph and Larry, or Joe better known as Elmer, and Larry and Bernie are coming in. Bernie's in Wilmington, Delaware. Joe's in Hartford, and Larry's in Kennebunkport. Brother Jimmy is going to come down, but he's heading for Russia, coincidentally, to build a church with 12 other disciples under the Hollis, Maine area. But going back to my brothers, you can imagine my parents were immigrants from Canada, and my father came here in 1922, and the young lady that he went with for a while in Canada, he called in 1925 and asked her to come to Brewer, Maine, and then took whatever identification papers she had and hid them, so she had to stay, and they were married in St. Teresa's Church out in Brewer, in South Brewer. And a lot of pleasant memories. I was back there and wanted to get a copy of the records and so forth. That church burned down with all the records in it. But they both got together in early 1925, and 7 children came as a result of that. And there are 5 boys living now. We lost Bobby in a drowning accident in 1948, but all 7 of them went to the parochial school here, which I think may be a record. I'm not sure.
The Higgins has had 6.
And Big Off,
Ross had 14.
Yeah.
Was it 12, 13, or 14?
13.
13, I thought it was 14 or 13. That's still quite a few.
Yeah, I was gonna
I
say,
think it's 11.
And Shane King had 11. Shane King had 11, so there were quite a few.
So we came in last on that.
We're a small group compared to that.
Sorry.
That's fine. It reminds me, I think what my mother told me a long time ago, son, you're going to have a lot of experiences. And I heard a lot of experiences today, subsequently I found out the definition of experience. Experience is what you get when you're expecting something else. The nuns had an awful lot of experience, I think, over that period of time. I do remember that, I don't know if it was Sister Teresa, was in the second grade.
Yes, I
Was in the
had,
second grade.
I
If I recall correctly, she had shoestrings she took from our shoes, and there were slats in the back of the chairs. And if you twisted and turned in your seat, you were qualified to have that shoestring lapped around your shoulder and tied through the slats back there and pulled back like this so that you couldn't move. If I recall correctly, she also had a ruler in the shape of a parrot.
I think that was a bigger, older grade. Wasn't that Sister Valeria had that parrot?
Well, yes, if I had to pick any of the nuns, I would pick Sister Valeria. Because I told her specifically one day that I wasn't going to put up with this anymore. She said, Father Fitz is due here in an hour. I said, I changed my mind.
But like that, you know, Joe, my younger brother, was always playing ball of some kind, but it seems that the public school had vacation a different week from us in the spring. We always had Holy Week, and they had it every 7 weeks, however it came, you know. But I don't know, fate or something intervened when we had ours. It seemed to rain, but it was always sunny. And Joe decided that he went to school when my older brother and I did, but he made a detour, and we didn't notice it. And he didn't go to school. And at noon the next day, Sister Crescentia called my father and said, Joe was not at school today, and wondered what could be done about it. And he says, well, he will go, and he will do whatever you say. At home, he does what I say, and when he's at school, I expect him to do as you say, and use whatever means you have. So, where was Joe? Joe was playing ball with the kids from the other school down in Glen Mary Lodge. But I think today, if a teacher called a parent, that many parents would not approve of them disciplining the child. Dad said, you know, that you're in charge of them now.
You're the boss.
You'll do whatever it takes. Joe didn't skip again.
When Father Jim Gower called me about this session down here, we got talking on the phone. We must have talked for 30 or 40 minutes. And he said that he remembers, and I don't know if it was Sister Ann Silva or not, but she gave a roaring talk on guardian angels. And he said that the more that she talked, he kept edging over in his seat because she indicated that guardian angels are always with you. And she kept looking at him and he kept moving over in his seat. She said, if you move any further, you're going to fall off the seat, move back. And he said, oh no, sister. He said, I'm making room for my guardian angel. And she said, guardian angels don't take up space. Move back. So he said, move back. I thought that was a great story. I have to tell you another story, which Sister Crescentia helped Freddie Warren and Johnny Gower, Jim's younger brother, and I have the notoriety of building the first split level in the United States on Paradise Hill. And we wondered where we were going to get the lumber to build it. And a very kind gentleman used to stack his lumber down here on the corner of Ledgelawn, and I can't remember the other street, where Kip sold.
Walden Road.
Walden Road, yeah. It was right on the corner, because Dave Peterson tore down the best cottages probably around here, and stored all the beautiful lumber that he got on that corner. He didn't know he made a donation, but there were quite a few trips with lumber piled on toboggans that went up to Paradise Hill, which obviously was National Park property. And we built a split level up there. And we decided we'd celebrate, by the way, and have squirrel stew. You're supposed to soak a squirrel overnight, like some animals, to get that game taste out of it. That wasn't in the recipe, but it was a wonderful stew until you started to taste it. And so we get through, and we said, oh gee, it's Saturday, we've got to go up on the hill and go inside these little cubby holes for confession. And so we used to listen to Sister Crescentia talk about sacrifice. So that came to our mind, and we decided, John and I, that we would sacrifice Freddie Warren to go in the confessional first. Freddie goes in the confessional. If we had sat any further back in the church, we'd have been outside. And John and I are in the pew back there. Our eyes were over the edge of it, listening and looking, and all of a sudden you heard this loud voice, which is Father Fitch, say, "You did what?" And we heard this faint sound confess to borrowing lumber from Dave Peterson. When Freddie, he told us later he was given 1,000 Hail Marys. He's still up there now. So I think John volunteered to go next. And the same expression came out. "You did what?" And then there was a pause. And John came out, but he didn't come back down where I was. And Father Fitz came out of the confessional and went inside and came back out. And I went through the same thing. And come to find out, Father Fitz had called up Dave Peterson, because I heard the story. He said, "Oh no, Father," he said, "that's perfectly all right." He said, "I was trying to, some of that lumber wasn't too good, and I was trying to get rid of it." Because Father Fitz, I heard later, was going to give Dave $10 for the lumber. But I just want you to know, I don't know if it still exists up there or not, but Sister Crescentia had a lot, it burned down, that's right. She had a lot to do with that. I think I'll back off from the rest of these stories here and pass this on.
Is Jimmy still here, my brother?
Yes.
This is a joke that Jimmy told me that I think kind of fits in, sitting in this hallowed building. There was an order called the Carmelite nuns that are very strict. So this young woman decided that she wanted to be a Carmelite, so she went through all the steps and so forth. And the day that she was ready to be not ordained and not circumcised, and what is it?
Professed or bound.
Professed. So she said to the Mother Superior was interviewing her, and she told her that, you know, what the rules are. This is a very strict order. You're not even allowed to speak. I will call you in every 10 years and you can say 2 words. Other than that, you do not speak. So she said, okay. So she agreed. 10 years went by and Mother Superior called her and said, "Do you have anything to say?" "Bad food." Another 10 years went by. She called her and she said, "Well, what would you like to say now, my dear?" "Hard beds." 10 more years went by. She came in. She said, "What would you like to say this time?" "I quit." "Thank God you've done nothing but bitch since you got here."
I find the mic back in front of my hand again. My memories of those years here in the convent, in this building, are delightful. Painful, sad, but delightful. I worked scrubbing these floors, waxing them. When I knelt to pray for all the people in the town, as well as the children, I never knelt on my hands, so it really wasn't that bad. I used to think about the women who had been here before. When the house was full. When I was here, there were just 3 sisters. I came here from having lived in a large community in Portland with 20 other very young sisters. Very happy, active, planning my whole life, and I came here with an older nun, Sister Manuel, and another woman, a few years older than I was, but very serious, quite sober nun. And it was kind of terrifying. I was by myself with my God, and then the children. And I taught 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And I remember saying to friends at home, I'm really teaching the sons and daughters of the sons and daughters of the caretakers, the gardeners, the housekeepers, and they're delightful children. There wasn't a non-learner in the bunch from K through 8th grade. No, sub-primary. Well, we didn't have sub-primary. 1st through 8th grade. Thank goodness. When I first came, I taught 4th, 5th, and 6th grade in one room. I had taught 26 4th graders prior to that. I felt like a circus, and I was the ringleader in each ring. How was I going to do it? The children taught me well how to do it. They taught me an appreciation of the island. Sonny's son, Dickie, just loved this place. I learned a great deal about that. His son, Tommy, taught me something about children's perspectives. Someone in the family was going away, and they were going to be in California. Another child said, "Is that very far away?" And Tommy said, "Yes, it is. It's off the island."
Wasn't that precious?
When the school was going to be closed in 1966, there was a small enrollment. There were probably 6 children in each grade all the way through. The parents didn't want the school to close. Many in the community didn't want the school to close. My boss, the Reverend Mother in Portland, wanted the school to close. My job, however, was principal of the school. Where did my allegiance lie? And I struggled with that and finally said, I guess it's really here with the people. And there was a study, and those parents worked very, very hard and came up with, they succeeded in convincing that I asked the school board to ask the Reverend Mother to keep the school open. They even convinced the pastor of the school, the pastor of the parish, Father Kenny, who wasn't initially very much in favor of the school, to try and keep the school open. But the Reverend Mother said, no, we really have got to close it. The sisters are needed elsewhere. And we left. And at that time, there was a movement within the church to consolidate. And so what they did was to turn the convent into an inter-community house, where there was one Sister Mercy, a couple of Josephite sisters, and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And they lived here, and they traveled Hancock and I think Washington County doing religious education work. And that went for probably 2 or 3 years, and they couldn't keep it up. And at that point, the convent was, I don't know if it was probably owned by the Whole Health Center. I came at one point and visited there. And then it was the Zen Buddhists, and then a private family. And now, to have it be part of the history of this town is very satisfying to me and to a lot of my friends who are still sisters back in Portland. It couldn't be put to a better use.
Here, here.
A little bit of folklore. The 2 stained glass windows upstairs, one of St. Louis and one of St. Edward, are the patron saints Louise and Edward Morrell. What we were always told was that one had the features of Mrs. Morrell and the other one had the features of Mr. Morrell. Whether that's folklore or true, I don't know, but that's the common belief among the sisters to this day. Yes.
I was curious, when the school was open and the convent was here, that was such a big place, and the two buildings and the church. Now, didn't they employ somebody like a janitor or someone to help with the heating and so forth?
The parish did have a janitor. During my day, it was John LaRosa, and it was John LaRosa for years, probably from Father Fitzpatrick's time on. And he handled the physical plant, both the church, the school, and here.
Yeah. Who was that?
John LaRosa.
He was from Harbor and Catholic.
Oh,
He
yes.
just died a couple of years ago. His wife, Grace, is still living. He came with Father Fitzpatrick. John's sister-in-law, B, was Father's housekeeper and cook, wonderful cook.
And what about the, like, when the school had lunch? Did they have it there at the schoolhouse, or did they all go home?
Oh, we went home.
There's two stories.
That's another story.
There's several stories about lunch. People might want to talk about them.
During the Second World War,
story.
during the Second World War, we had lunch in the parish hall.
That's
And
right.
after the war stopped, we didn't have lunch there. And I remember the concho.
And it cost 5 cents a meal.
Yeah, that's right.
25 cents bought you lunch for a week. Yep. Mrs. Casey, Melina Casey was cook. What biscuits? Remember those biscuits? No, they
No,
didn't
not
want
my time.
Mine-
You went to
Then
school,
after
you
the
went
war,
home.
we had to bring a sandwich and we looked out of town. After the ones that couldn't get home. Because we lived down on Lower Main Street when I was in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And we brought a sandwich every day.
The McIsaacs must have too, because they lived at the nursery, and I can
Right, that's
remember
over a mile from here.
Pew used to bring them in the morning. And must have picked them up, there were no buses, so there were no, even in town there weren't buses. Wasn't until
Buses
later
for the
years.
public schools.
When?
Well, I was living down there in Lower Schoonahedra when, and we always had a bus.
Did you?
Yeah, went to Otter Creek, went right around the Ocean Drive,
I didn't.
picked us up and.
No blue bus.
Huh?
No blue bus.
Yeah.
I know, we went
And
down
then
to the
Trevor
Otter Creek
drove it.
line and then we went back and around Otter Creek and around the Ocean Drive. There were Anthony's lived, you must have, the Anthony's lived down there and the Grosses and
Oh, right.
Yeah.
the Liscums. And
The
We
Curtis.
went to Catholic school, but the 3 years that I was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, the public school bus picked us up.
It was a while there was transportation.
I thought
Yeah,
maybe
that's
the
got-
McIsaacs
and,
rode on our bus, but I'm
Paul
not sure of that.
Salisbury, who's Dayton's brother, they lived on the Ocean Drive Road,
Right.
and they used to pick Paul up and do the ride.
Yeah, I think the McIsaacs may have ridden with us, I'm not positive.
That's a
They
very
never-
interesting story, because it was true. One time, the public school provided transportation here to the school, and then it was changed. It was the town that did it, and then the state legislature said no more.
Right.
And at that point, the school stopped providing that transportation. There always was a very good relationship between the administrative staff of the Catholic school and the public school during my time. As I said, I was here 6 years. When I came back, and I had one group, I think one of Sonny's children was in that class. I had the 4th grade, the 5th grade, half of their 6th, all of their 7th, and all of their 8th grade. One woman. That's an awful lot of influence on a group of kids. And what we were able to do was to have them go to the public school for science. They went to the public school for science. I think at one point the public school also provided phys ed, not phys ed, but shop training at one point for the boys in the school.
Manual training.
Yes, manual training. The seminarians came down and taught phys ed, so they got exchanged with that. And then I had that was Sister Frances Clare, a sister of French extraction, who taught conversational French. So there was a bit of a change back and forth.
But I don't remember any bus in my time in the grammar school.
Our daddy used to, when we lived in House Cove, He used to drive us.
Yeah.
That's when he had the grocery store, and we were late, always late, and always totally seeing kids out recess. No, I never did. The bell's been rung, they're inside.
That's because you had the public schools, they had a public school in Holtzcott, and they had a public school in Salisbury Cove, so they didn't run buses until high school.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, but we were in the public school of Bar Harbor, and Otter Creek had its own school, I believe, but we went partially to Otter Creek. I can just tell you the driveway that bus turned around in, but we were Bar Harbor. But you know, even Eagle Lake Road had its separate school.
That's right.
Way back, when I was in school, grade school, there were no buses except for high school students.
That's what I
Because every district had a school, House Cove had a school, Town Hill had a school, Forest Street out by the golf links had the first 5 grades. Whatnot.
So that's
The
why
first time you saw all the people your age was when you were a freshman in high
High
school.
school, right.
I think 1942, they made all the buses and closed all those schools.
Yeah.
Everybody came into.
See, I got up in 35, so
I
all
just
the
remember
people
reading
from the
about it, it was like
islands all moved.
1942, they said, all those little schools are gonna be closed, and everyone will go to Bar Harbor from now on.
That's
Which was
why
down there with Sonny Cough's apartments, I know. That was public school, I remember, Emerson School.
That's why
Right.
we didn't have the snow days, because we didn't have that many bus students. Even in high school, the bus either got there or it didn't. We had school.
That's right.
If they were late, okay. But I don't remember the bus never came to the Catholic school until after I was out.
No, they didn't have buses at that age for any kids.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. that's
I
what
mean, not
thought.
for public school either, for grammar school.
Well, that's what I meant,
Yeah.
at grammar school. I thought you meant they picked you up.
Well, they did us because we were Bar Harbor, but they didn't pick up Hulse Cove,
Oh, no,
Salisbury
no,
Cove, Eden,
no.
and so forth, but that's, no, they picked us
But I
up.
know the McKays
I remember.
dropped their kids off here. I remember the day that Mrs. McKay.
Well, that's when the Ocean Drive was
Now,
still away.
as Anna's talking about the McKays, I'm thinking of MJ.
Oh, yeah. Another generation. Another generation, yeah, I'm talking about the older McKays. Yeah. We went, of course, we did in high school too, we went home to lunch, back.
There was a real stigma if you were a bus person had to eat lunch at school.
I know my husband always talked about, he lived out beyond the golf links. And all the way through grade school and high school, he ran home to lunch. He got his lunch and ran back again.
So he could make it, right?
Sure.
But I can remember the nuns taking us on picnics.
He could run.
I remember the nuns taking us on a picnic. We went on Bar Island. The first time really I was ever on Bar Island. But they found out where some of the kids lived, and they were amazed at how fast some of the kids walked, you know, to school, and especially going home to lunch and back. The Mosleys lived down on Billings Avenue, and the Campbells up on Oak Street, and they went home to school, to lunch and came back.
We always did.
We did. And then we also went on boat ride with Charlie Parker's boat, you know, and went around. Yeah, we had a lot of opportunities, I think, because we were small, you know. Might not, they have field trips now, but we have bus then, you know.
We had it at times to play baseball, the real game, not just a picnic game. And Sister Sarah was her name. I don't know if you know Sister Sarah. She taught each one of the game and how it's supposed to go. She taught us how to play basketball, what the boys way. And some of the boys, like Jimmy McKay and Leon Hubbard and all of them, they were so good that the public school asked them to come and play on their 7th and 8th grade team. But it was only because that nun, and she also had a science club. We were 5th graders and she taught us. So we'll have a science club after school, which was great, you know. So it just wasn't all fun and games. It was,
Yeah, I was just going to ask if any of the Catholic school participated in public schools athletics.
not until I think the
High
early
school.
50s. No, in the early 50s, they allowed our junior high kids, or what would be junior high age, 7th and 8th graders, to go to the public school and play on their basketball team. That was, and also, someone said a long time before that, they weren't allowed to go to the Y or something.
That's true.
But see, when I went to high school, junior high, we always went to the Y. I was a Y team and everything. So I don't know what that rule was. I don't remember any of that.
You're too young.
I'm too young, I'm sorry. The way the bodies in the early 50s, we did things different after the war. After the big war.
We liberalized
We liberalized, yeah.
Betty, did you ever know Sister Roseanne?
Yes,
Wasn't she good?
yes.
'Cause I know her as a neighbor, because my grandparents owned the house next door until, well, 1956 when they died. So I knew her as a neighbor. And when she was transferred, as we would call it, to Augusta, I go down to see her a few times in the convent there. And she said, well, I know who your friends are in Bar Harbor. She said, one of my experiences was, so this boy in the 8th grade, he wasn't old enough to have a driver's license. So he came down Shannon Road in his little bitty car, and he said, oh, get in, sister, I'll just take you down to the end of the road. And he took me up on Mount Desert Street and all over town. And you know what it was, don't you? Jimmy Cough.
That sounds typical.
Unbelievable.
There is one thing, I think we never really see ourselves as others see us. And I think we probably, particularly I think as religious women, I think the sisters who are here, some of the hard-nosed Irish, Catholic, careful. Hard-nosed French, I can't leave anything out. Very, strict and formidable. But truly doing what they felt was best for those children and for the school. And I think some of them were really very hard. My experiences were very different than a lot of people growing up here in Bar Harbor. The sisters seem to have been easier. Anna has the good memories.
I do.
Janice has the good memories. But everyone has stories of the not so good.
I wonder if it depends on how good the kids were.
I think that's a good question from the standpoint of you can talk about experiences that you can remember, and some, maybe in the context of that time, weren't too good. I was just sitting here reminiscing, going back. I was away 3.5 years from Bar Harbor when I was in the service, almost 4 years. And outside of that, we have never missed coming back to Bar Harbor. And and in a couple of instances where life was to be cut off in a couple diving experiences, up in the Stillwater River, where a little boy fell in. We cut 10-foot square holes in the ice, went down. The helmet was caught between the bottom of the ice and the bottom. And they say when you're getting ready to go, your past life flashes in front of you. It's like a movie screen. And all your sins and what you want to atone for, and the few minutes you have to say penance is very valuable to you, because maybe you can square things before you go up. And I remember this instance, all the police department were up there, they had brought my diving equipment up, and those 3 or 4 minutes that my life was ebbing, that screen was a perfect blank. I had been in the service, I knew the difference between boys and girls. At the time I was 22, I think. And yet it was a complete blank. And it makes you wonder, going back to how we were handled, what our expectations were. And I just got to believe that there was something, some inner strength that was conveyed by that. I thought about this a lot, and even going by this building and after the school was sold and so forth. And you're lucky back at that time to know that you were gonna have 3 meals a day. I can see my dad in December, January, and February, snowing and looking out the window, wondering how he's gonna pay for the food over at McFarland's over on School Street. And he and I talked about this. And I said, we're worrying now whether or not we can take care of our children if something should happen for the rest of their lives, if they need to be educated and so forth. And back at that time, they were living from day to day. When he knew that there was money coming in the next day, he was pretty content. And I told him, I said, gee, Dad, how did you live under those circumstances where you couldn't plan maybe a couple of days ahead of time? He said, well, did anybody know that life was any different than that?
That's
And
true.
I thought that was pretty good. But I think all the experiences that coming up as a youngster, and then there were 6 more after me. Once you could start walking, you were on your own. The reason I put on so much weight early because I had the longest arms at the time. And although the rest of my brothers were all taller, and the last one was 6'6", 6'7", so they must have got fed somewhere. But not to get too personal on this, but just in reminiscing and thinking back about those 8 years down here. And in this building right here, I know when I served Mass, and we obviously couldn't eat because we were going to have communion, and halfway through the Mass, I'd keel over, and they'd bring me aside because I needed the sustenance. And finally, the nuns took a vote, petitioned Father Fitz to feed me, to allow me to eat before I came in, even though you weren't supposed to, because they couldn't put up with someone serving Mass. It happened up on the Holy Redeemer also. But it's a great question that you bring up, or thoughts that you bring up in terms of if you did a statistical study of kids that graduated from that environment and then moved on, and what they reminisce in terms of how their life unfolds and so forth. And I think there was a tremendous amount of inner strength that was cultivated. Obviously, we didn't recognize at that time. But that also was part of what pulled my wife Vanessa and I back. I'm the only one that married a girl from Bar Harbor, so we don't have a debate about where we go or vacation or anything like that. And, she does everything I tell her anyhow. But I think there's something. I think there's something, an aura that you've all talked about here that comes out of that, and I felt it more and more as you talked in this area. And I think it's great too that it wound up containing past history and future history, and I was so pleased to hear that Bar Harbor Historical Society are taking over.
Just along that same vein, I can remember day after day, no one's mentioned yet that we said prayers in school when we used to kneel down on the hardwood floor every day and say prayers. And just
The beginning of school, the end of it.
Yeah, we didn't pray all the way through. Sometimes we prayed on the teachers.
And then we did schoolwork in between time.
But I can remember, so I started there in 1933. We were in the Depression, and I can remember almost every day we were praying that somebody's father would get a job.
He ate plenty of apples.
Potatoes. Father Fitz not only
potatoes from Benedict Domain and brought
them here, and anyone, Catholic, non-Catholic, were welcome to anything that he had, but potato line, bushels, barrels of them even. Many winters, a lot of non-Catholic also survived with potatoes. It was hard times here in the 30s, right up really into World War II. It was after World War II, or during World War II, when people began to go to Portland, Brunswick, wherever they could find a job. They hadn't had a steady job for years. They did piecemeal. They worked summers for the people who came at very low wages. And it was hard times. But we're all in the same boat. That was the
That's
thing, we
right.
were all in the
We
same
were
boat.
poor, but we didn't know it.
That's right.
Everybody else was in the same boat.
They were good years too, weren't they?
Oh,
They were good years.
I wanted to ask you how you found going from the Catholic school to high school. Did you have an adjustment to make?
Yes.
I was,
Because I came down from the country, from Salisbury Cove, and I tell you, it took me a year to get integrated with the young people who had gone to the public school
Me too,
here.
really.
And to make, because I knew none of them, and to
Mary?
make friends and,
Mary McLeod Cunningham was really the only one I really knew well. And I was overwhelmed. I really was. And yet, I did well in school. I think it was the kids who didn't maybe do as well scholastically that had the hardest problem, unless they also could do athletics. And
The
then you
boys
could,
had
you
easier, I
could
think.
integrate, and it got easier.
I didn't have any trouble adjusting to the high school, but there were 5 of us went on, 4 boys and myself. And I said, oh, here comes these Catholic school kids. They're dumb, And so the first semester, I think, 4 out of 5 were on the honor roll. And then they said, oh, you gotta look out for John Kelly, you gotta look out for this one. And then they said, hey, these kids that came from St. Edwards are not dumb. It was just like, oh. They stood back then,
It was really the numbers, I think, when you were asking about what was it like.
yes, from a
There
small
were,
class.
there were 6 in my class over here, and but we had 7th and 8th grade, so I would guess there are probably 10 or 12 students in the 7th and 8th grade going into a class. I think we had 48 in a class of 49. We had 48 students, and it was just so big, and there were so many of them. It just took a little getting used to.
Yeah.
Like about a week, right?
Well, they had to get used to us too.
We had it all figured out.
Did you hit it off with the teacher also?
Oh,
Was a
yeah.
big thing,
Yes.
and I unfortunately, or fortunately, had Mr. Fuller, who was the principal and whose reputation preceded him, for my algebra teacher.
Yes.
And I was just totally in mortal fear of him. And one day, he came, I got a call from the office to report to the office. And I had never reported to an office in my life. And I went in, and Mr. Fuller is there, and he says, I don't see your algebra paper for the day before, or whatever. And I said, I didn't know how to do it. And he said, I don't recall your coming in for help. That would be the last thing I would think of. He said, well, I will see you after school tonight. And it broke the ice. I did very well the rest of it, and I also felt more at ease, and
Mm-hmm. As far as Mr. Fuller was concerned, I was in school when he first came here, and I was graduated in '35. And he hadn't been here a week before he had been nicknamed, he was Flannelfoot Fuller. He wanted to be friendly with all the students and wanted to know, I said, if you're talking in the hall, and look around there and right over the shoulder.
You never heard him.
And he soon found out that he was called Flannelfoot Fuller, and he stopped doing it. Then he started again. Wrong class of students, you didn't give him good training after you got
But my best friend in high school was his daughter. And
lovely family.
yes, they were. And I had a different perspective. And he was so different at home, I mean, you go into his house and he was Annette's dad, I mean, she was not Mr. Fuller, I mean, not as we thought of him, principal. But it was hard going in. It was. And especially, as I say, I didn't even have one friend from my school in the classes with me. I don't think boys probably as much, because
Yeah.
you play together
Friends for now.
all the time, you know, in the ball fields and the basketball
I
court.
guess that's true, yeah.
And I think your group, Joe and John and Bob Frazier and Bobby Robin, I never saw a bigger group who had, and quite hang on, Dick Woodard. I mean, there just seemed to be such a group of camaraderie, you know, I mean, it was just so much more than girls. Girls are quirky. I think they're more so than
I'd like
boys.
to hear more philosophy about that.
That's the extent I am. And I think you mingled with the public school, the boys more than the girls did in those days too. Playing ball, you must have. The ballpark was always full. You don't have that now either.
Well, I-
Because they have organized sports now.
Yeah.
When we were kids, it was pick-me-up baseball.
Well, YMCA was a great neutralizer.
It was.
As you mentioned earlier about I remember at lunchtime going up to the Y and learning how to play chess.
Oh, right.
Every noon time, we were up there playing chess during the lunch hour. Oh, we probably doing some other things, but
Yes, right.
but that was even to the point where one time Father Fitz was going to start. I don't want to get into that side of it, but he wanted to start the Parish Hall,
Oh, yeah.
a sort of a YMCA concept at that time. But that was a great neutralizer. I mean, from the standpoint of bringing that transition
Right.
from this training as we went into high school and so forth.
I see Ed and Debbie looking at their watches. which
Well, it's
probably
been,
time.
it's hard to realize it's been an hour. You could keep right on going, I think it's wonderful. But, I don't want to put a strain on you. I want to thank all of you for a fascinating glimpse at a very important part of the history of the town. Really, it's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Debbie, are we serving anything? I think. But it's the one thing I will say is I'm awfully sorry that Jim Gower wasn't able to get back from Woodland, because he is really tops. I think anybody in the town would say that.
Charles Reed.
Yeah, wasn't it, Betty, wasn't it Sister Rita that was the last one here?
One of the last, there was closed closed. And there were four, and Sister Rita was one of them.
Yeah, she was very good. She had all the clergy wives in one time, and they all discussed common problems. Well, see who else is here on this. It's hard to turn around the wall, you know. There we all are back there. Well, just let it run for a bit so I know where there's a break in it. That was great.
What did you get in my arm? I said, I had me. She said, what? And then I said, well, sure.
Once you get up, you're all right.
That's more sense.